Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here today. Members of the media, you're very welcome. We've issued a crime report in advance, a narrative to give you some structure in terms of our briefing today. We're here to present the 2018 annual crime report in terms of our crime statistics. It's been a pretty mixed bag over 2018, varied results across the various crime sectors, and we're here to answer any questions that you might have in terms of your interpretation, or if we can contextualise the figures we have provided you, we'd be more than happy to do that. Suffice to say, Cayman Islands remains a very safe jurisdiction, very safe place to live, to work and to visit and to retire indeed and to conduct business. So we're pretty happy in terms of the overall crimes. There are variances across the crime sectors, but a reasonably good year in terms of our performance. Lots more to be done, obviously, and we won't be taking our foot off the pedal. We'll continue focusing on the things that need to be focused on. So, ladies and gentlemen, and members of the media, we'll hand it over to deal with any questions you may have. You're aware of who we have here today: Deputy Commissioner Kurt Walton, Operations; Deputy Commissioner Ennis, Governance and Strategy; Detective Superintendent Peter Lansdown, CID; and Superintendent Brad Ebankston from Specialist Operations, which covers our Joint Marine, our Air Ops and our K9 Patrol sectors. So we're here to assist you in any way we can in terms of interpreting the crime stats.
Yeah, James Whittaker, Cayman Compass. A couple of the more interesting or the larger change statistics, I guess. We're starting with the burglary rate, which was down significantly, and I think you're attributing that, I believe, to some significant arrests in the last couple of years. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, okay, so during 2018 there was a particular focus we carried on. Obviously, we look at our statistics year on year. So last year we had some spikes in burglary. 2018 was a much better year. The reductions are pretty good. Not to say that there aren't lots of injured parties and victims that we're concerned about. However, we did see a reduction, particularly in the residential burglaries, and we're particularly pleased with that. It's nothing that you can say that you've arrived at a position that's satisfactory. We've got to continue to address the burglary problem as we go forward. We did have some significant arrests during the year. You do have prolific recidivist offenders operating. They have been targeted by our crime task force and our CID portfolio with some good success, and some of those persons are either remanded pending trial or have been committed on sentence to Northwood Prison.
How do you handle that in the next step of that as to when some of these guys come out, not necessarily those guys particularly, but is there any work going on with the prison, the parole, to ensure that we don't just see spikes when guys come out and repeat and just get back into the cycle?
Okay, so that's a kind of pretty complex and multifaceted kind of question in terms of the people are released when it's decided by the courts or at the end of a prison term. So when they get out, yes, there's plenty of cooperation with the Director of Prisons. And indeed, we with the Conditional Release Board, we're in constant contact providing reports to them. When they're out, it requires us to monitor their movements, see what they're doing, and we have to put our investigative skills to use then to tackle them, address them, use the principles of best evidence and take them before the court. That's it's a constant for any police service, including the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service.
Another statistic that jumped out was an increase in assaults and ABH. I think Mr. Ennis spoke about this previously when the hours were pushed back for nightclubs and bars, and it was highlighted then, I think, as a concern that this might happen. Do you see a link there between, I guess, kicking out time at the bars and some of these assaults, and or what else would you say is driving that
The
increase?
answer is yes, and my colleagues can jump in there. My answer is yes. We do link with the licensing board to tell them we do have some difficulties in terms of crowds gathering at night time, flashpoints, late at night or in the early hours of the morning at some of the discos and late night outlets, and we do have some concerns around that. We tend to increase our patrols Friday night and Saturday night when they're very prevalent, and on bank holiday weekends when they're prevalent. We do find ourselves making lots of arrests for assaults and intervening in public order situations. So yes, the nighttime economy, while it's very welcome from an economic perspective, it does bring us some difficulties, but I think the best way to address that is the police working with the licensing board to express our concerns, which we do on a regular basis.
Any hopes on your part to walk that back, that extension of the hours, or is that something that we have to live with at this point?
No, I don't think that's what we're looking for. We're not trying to interfere with the economic aspect of it at all. What we're trying to do is make sure that we're there when we're supposed to be there, and the security and CCTV are working at the premises, and then premises that don't provide adequate security, we'll deal with that through the licensing board. That's the way we're addressing it.
Okay, and then just to move on, the traffic enforcement has obviously been a massive increase, the speeding tickets in particular. Is there I mean, obviously that's partly due to a strategic decision. Is that going to continue? Is there any is that likely to be bolstered perhaps by speed cameras at any point? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, so there are multiple strands of work going on there. We have a dedicated traffic unit there now with significant resources in at the moment. We do intend increasing it incrementally as we go forward. The National Security Council have decided it is a priority to develop a road safety strategy, and myself and some other agencies are working on developing that strategy to present it before the NSC for approval, and that should come to fruition in the coming months. So that is a key priority. When you're looking at a population of somewhere in the region of 60 plus, and then a vehicle population that we're aware of 41,000 plus, figures provided by the vehicle driving licence section, there's an awful lot of traffic on the road. We're seeing an awful lot of intemperate habits on the road and some really bad driving. So the detections have been significantly upped during 2018, and our focus is to continue with that enforcement strategy. But just to signify, it's not all about enforcement. Education and engineering are really big parts of the road safety strategy, and enforcement alone won't solve the problem. We've got to look at multiple factors, and we've got to bring multiple agencies on board who are more than willing to come on board. And when all the goals are agreed by the National Security Council, we'll work collaboratively to deliver on those goals. But engineering and enforcement are really significant parts of any road safety strategy.
Is there any indication that speed cameras might be part of the strategy?
Yeah, those discussions have taken place. There's a lot of work has to be done on that. It's not an off-the-shelf solution. It's something that requires physical infrastructure and then back office administration. It's a pretty big project. It requires the National Roads Authority, Road Safety, Police and the courts, judicial administration, for us all to work together to have a seamless end-to-end process to make this work. So certainly discussions have taken place. It's not there in the immediate term, but I can see it as something that will be achieved under a national road safety strategy.
Okay, and just one other aspect from the stats was the referrals for domestic violence and I think child safety, which were up hugely. I think domestic violence 3 or 4 times over 3 years. I think any concerns about that or any context to that?
Well, there's a number of ways of looking at that. I mean, since the establishment of MASH, the multi-agency safeguarding hub under the family support, it's a successor to FSU more or less. We have seen a lot more confidence in terms of the multi-agency approach, people coming forward, reporting incidents. The other part of that is a lot of our officers have received training. There's much more awareness inside in our organisation and indeed in other government organisations, so people are more willing to report the instances of domestic violence and assaults and all the issues that occur familial to the family support unit. There's better recording structures in place. So we tend to have better statistics on what the actual situation is as it is occurring on the island. So a pretty serious situation in terms of resources and the responses that are required in terms of dealing with domestic violence and other familial issues that come to the attention of the multi-agency safeguarding hub MASH.
I think it's important to point out, so there were 3,000 referrals into the safeguarding hub last year, but that doesn't mean there were anything like that in crimes and offences. That was 3,000 suspicious activities that people have reported that we investigated, but there was a far fewer, probably 10% of those resulted in crimes actually being reported. So it's just people are more aware of their responsibilities, mandatory reporters, people who have to report suspicious activity when it comes to child abuse or potential possible child abuse.
And that's an important factor. I think you'll see that in the figures that were presented to you. You won't see 3,000 crimes. You see what's being broken down to the investigated ones. Yeah, referrals, yeah.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Wendy from Cayman News Service. Can you just give us an idea on how you're measuring performance in terms of actually solving and wrapping up cases? So have we got some kind of statistics or measurement on that type of thing?
We do, but not the way I would like them at the minute. So what we don't have in the organisation at the moment are crime analysts. And in June of this year, we've completed the interview and recruitment process. 2 crime analysts will join us. And that will give us a greater focus on the detection rate. So the traditional measurements of crime were reporting and detection, but actually the greater measurement is reduction and prevention. And the difficulty for any police services is recording the level or percentage of prevention that you have. And you spoke earlier about the burglary figure. So you're seeing a reduction, you're seeing a preventative element, and it's hard to put a percentage on that. We will have greater statistics as we go forward. We do use the UK counting rules on it. So a number of people will come in. I think we've said it in the report there. They may have committed multiple crimes but admit to one. That's a position that leaves us in a difficulty in terms of our detections.
Oh yes, you never know that if they're convicted for one.
Well, we would suspect them of committing, multiple crimes. If you pick a figure of 8 or 10 and they admit to one, it's that one that's detected. But in fact, the information, and it's pretty strong information, would indicate that they are engaging in recidivist behaviour and they are prolific burglars. That does present a challenge for us. But again, as I said, the traditional counting or methods of looking at performance management or performance indicators for crime were commission and detection. But I think you need to take the wider picture and looking at prevention and reduction. So you'll see that across a number of categories, and correspondingly you see increases in other categories. A lot of those are environmental trends and factors.
April Cummings, Radio Cayman. Could you speak to maybe areas of optimism as well as concern? Just sort of an overarching perspective.
Well, the optimism is that we're doing a lot with young people. The community policing program is doing a lot in different areas, engaging with the young people. You'll be aware there's the Deputy Governor is chairing a group recently established to deal with young people and gangs to provide alternatives, early intervention schemes. Child safeguarding is really paramount. It's up there at the top of it's at the strategic apex of what people are doing right across government. Those are all very encouraging. They're the next generation. You need to invest in them there now, and I think everybody across government is aware that we need to invest in the youth, and there's a huge focus on that. Community policing it's delivering very good results for us at the moment. The feedback is quite good. There's what we were concerned about earlier around connectivity and engagement, and the feedback is why we don't get it right, all of the time. We are making good strides in terms of connecting. We still have a lot of work to do there. We don't underestimate that challenge. So they're all good reasons for optimism. In terms of concern, we'd like to keep the crime levels as low as possible. That's what we're trying in all categories. But when you see the figures of 30,000 reports made during the year converting to only 3,000 crimes, it's relatively very small, the crimes. And as you break them out across the categories, the serious crimes are relatively small within the overall crime commission figures. So there's pretty good news all around. We'd prefer if we had no crime, but obviously there's crime. It's an environmental, it's an impact on society. It's a fact that we have crime, but the figures are quite manageable in terms of the jurisdiction we're in.
Andrew Harris with Cayman 27. You say that the Cayman Islands is still a safe place to live.
Yeah.
But murders doubled. Rapes remained unchanged reported rapes remained unchanged at 17.
Yeah.
And we saw a spike by a third in reported robberies.
Yeah.
Is the new policing strategy working?
Well, it is. I mean, look, early in the year, we can break down the murders. There were 3 firearms murders and 1 domestic-related murder that we've dealt with. They're all detected persons before the court or going before the court. So these are the societal issues I'm talking about, environmental trends and factors we have to deal with. We're not absent of those in the Cayman Islands. They are a reality for us here in the Cayman Islands. The fact is that we know where it's coming from. It's not gang related. which is pretty important to us. If you look back at where we were some years ago, we know the background to them, we've established the motives. So yes, there are serious crimes occurring, but there are very good investigations taking place and some very significant detections taking place.
On that note as well, or just backtracking a bit, you stated that there was a particular method in which the crimes are being counted and recorded, i.e. the most serious offense, the primary offense being the one that's recorded, whereas the secondary offenses aren't.
Yeah.
Then if that is the case, how accurate are these stats?
No, well, then I think we did set out to explain that there's what's called predicate or primary and secondary. So a person going in with a weapon into a shop, robbing and getting injuring someone as well, it's a robbery with a weapon of offence, and it's obviously an assault on the person. The primary offence is the robbery, but the narrative captures the secondary offence. It's all there in the crime reporting. For the purpose of our recording here, as it's done in all jurisdictions, you report the primary offences. And I think we went to some trouble to explain that in terms of the narrative, that you would understand the predicate and the secondary offences. It's an internationally recognised crime counting rule. You couldn't be recording because your detections would be skewed as well. So if you detect it, you'll be charging for two. You'll be detecting 2 crimes instead of 1 crime.
Sorry, let me just quote this figure accurately. 24,891 pounds of cannabis, herbal. Ah, my bad. I stand corrected. 2,489 pounds of herbal cannabis intercepted or seized during 2018. Is this an exercise in futility? There seems to be an obvious demand, and regardless of what police are doing, you're catching them. But is police, is this the right way to deal with the matter?
Well, I certainly don't think, as a police commissioner, could sit here and say it's an exercise in futility. It's a criminal offence under the penal code, and the fact is that the cannabis, ganja, as it's referred to, commonly imported from a neighbouring jurisdiction, a very near neighbouring jurisdiction, is a criminal offence and a predicate criminal offence. And it leads to all aspects of money laundering and criminal enterprises, both in Jamaica and here in Cayman Islands. So it's something we're right to be concerned about. In some of the shipments, their firearms have been recovered, most notably last year. But in this year, some firearms, 2 firearms have been recovered in the shipments. So it's not anything that I, or indeed the senior command team, would like to ignore in RCIPS. We do see it as a very serious offence, and I don't think it's an exercise in futility.
Is there any figures for cocaine?
Yes.
Is that in there? Sorry, I just...
Much smaller amounts of cocaine
you'd
seized.
hope,
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question, because it came up quite a lot in the Legislative Assembly during the last session about the CCTV, and obviously I know it's been the newer cameras are being rolled out, but how is it impacting your detection and your ability to investigate at the moment? What kind of situation have you got? I mean, I think at the moment we've got half of the old ones and half new ones. So can you give us an idea about where it's helping and where it's hindering?
I mean, it does help us. It helps us very recently in a fatal traffic accident that we've been dealing with only in the last 2 to 3 weeks. Some very vital evidence recovered from the public CCTV system. So that in itself, I mean, is really significant. We have vehicles moving around, so persons involved in criminal enterprise do use the public road networks to get around, and the cameras are obviously very important. So it gives us, what we're trying to do is maximise the opportunities, and working with 9/11 Centre and the director there, some of the cameras are being upgraded with greater facilities, and we tend to work in terms of prioritising at locations, and that's working pretty good. So while there's room for improvement, certainly I and the command team encourage as many cameras as we can get. It does help us.
But are you, because what they were talking about was the problems of some of the older cameras. I mean, are you finding that those older cameras really aren't much use to you guys? Because that was what was being implied, is that the new ones are great, but the old ones, you can't see anything on them.
Well, it's not you can't see anything. The best way of describing that is, and my colleagues can jump in, Deputy Commissioner Walton deals with it and Detective Superintendent Lansdown, you have to use enhancement processes. So it can be done. It's quite an expensive process, but in serious crimes, we do use the enhancement process and we do have to seek professional services to help us enhance. But it certainly leads us in a direction, or can lead us in a direction that can assist us in our investigations. So while it might not be as clear as we would like, we certainly can't ignore it. It is helpful, but I do think as we go forward, we will have a better system across the island.
I think the answer, Wendy, there's something is better than nothing, and some of the cameras are challenging, but at least we can pick up individuals, we can pick up vehicles, we can track them on to other locations where the better cameras give us the images that we need for evidential purposes. So it all works.
Oh, that's interesting. So, in other words, the new and the old are kind of mixed up. We haven't got areas where we've got all old in one place and all new in another. That isn't how the situation is.
Not that I'm aware of.
No,
Yet.
I think it's mixed. I mean, the cameras that are actually broken are being replaced on a priority basis. Then in consultation with ourselves, the director of 9/11 then is selecting other locations for priority installation. So that's working well, and I think it'll get better as we go forward.
I also think it might be useful to add to that what we have found beneficial is we have seen more and more private CCTV. And although it's a cost to homeowners and commercial businesses, but that's something that is very encouraging, and that has been very helpful as well.
Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up to that, not directly related, but a few years back there was a lot of criticism about the relationship between the police and the public. We know that community policing has had some payoff, but overall, how do you feel that's going, the relationship between the police force and the community at large? Are you getting the kind of responses that you need, leads that you need? How's it going?
Well, okay, if I answer that one first and maybe your colleagues come in then. So, yeah, I do see an improvement moving around from community meeting to community meeting and across the island. So we find a great willingness on the part of persons to want to engage. Their concern, and we raised it here before, was if they said something to the police, they couldn't be assured or feel confident that the information wouldn't be shared with someone. We've been working hard to explain that to our officers. We've done customer service training, and one of the very big significant developments I think that has bridged any gap between the police service and the community is the establishment and introduction of the Ombudsman Office. There's an independent complaints commissioner there, and if people feel there's a problem in the way they've been treated by the police, they can go to the Ombudsman Office. It's investigated completely independently and the decision is made independently, and we're working hard with the Ombudsman Office to make sure that we are fully engaged and fully connected to that process with the Ombudsman herself and indeed her team. And I think that with our community policing and the fact that we all attend community meetings, we make an effort to go out and meet the communities, and the big thing is being there, communicating, listening, but also hearing what's being said and then coming back and doing something about it, not just leaving it and walking away, that we follow up and we're able to make contact with the person that's giving us the information to tell them, look, something has happened, we've done A, B, C or D with it. And the feedback is certainly, some of the letters and some of the mails I get are encouraging. I can't say 100%, I wouldn't want to say 100%. We still have lots of difficulties and we have officers that leave a lot to be desired. We're working on that, so we're well aware of that. But you've asked, I think the primary question was, has there been an improvement? And I would say yes, definitively there has been an improvement. Plenty more room for what we're doing. But then from our own media department, we're communicating more, we're telling more. People can communicate inwards with us, they can leave messages and tell us, and I pick it up, and Jackie and Jody there and Mikhail in the morning come in and tell me we're after receiving 3 complaints. We look at them. Our professional standards unit, Deputy Commissioner Ennis, will be strengthening that this year so we can provide a response as well as the Ombudsman. So we're pretty aware that these things happen and pretty aware that we need to connect and need to be accountable to the community, and there's a focus on that within the organisation.
Commissioner, well, anyone really. 510 burglaries in 2017, dropped by 324 in 2018. I know that the police is doing a lot. We can see that here in the numbers. But I point to a case of Snug Harbor where we saw that particular neighborhood, that community being plagued by burglaries. But once a neighborhood watch was set up, it significantly helped to decrease the number of burglaries and even led to a person being caught. Is that what is needed? You know, have we reached a stage where police are doing all they can and now it's time for the community to step up?
No, well, I think it's a partnership. I don't think it's the police or the community. I think it's the partnership. That's the really key point. And the Snug Harbor one was becoming a great difficulty for us, and we put the resources in, but we also worked with the community. And you'll be aware that each of our community police officers now has a smartphone. That was a commitment we gave last year, and we did receive some sponsorship from Crime Stoppers to enable that. So they're engaged in WhatsApp groups. That has been very positive. We are getting information real time. And just to take a snapshot of how the groups work, we had an incident last week in Webster Estates, and within a very short few hours, persons were dealt with. The community had come together. WhatsApp messages had been shared with police and other members of that community inside. We put a lot of information together in 24 hours, which basically restored community confidence, because I think people were afraid of what was happening in the community. But we were on the ground very quickly, working with the community. The WhatsApp was hot on the day. We were getting the information real time, and it was dealt with within a matter of hours. So really effective method of communication between police, community, WhatsApp groups, and working together in partnership.
And if I may, I can't overemphasize it enough of what the Commission said about police-community partnerships, because that's one of the things that I've seen evolving now in Cayman, where a lot more communities are getting together and building these community groups and using social media to keep in touch and report suspicious activities. And Prospect is another area that I'm very encouraged by what's happening in Prospect on all levels, how they get engaged in their community, and it's happening all across the country. So that is a very positive thing, that people are still very much conscious and aware and are not tolerant of some of the behaviors and some of the things that happen in society, and want to work with the police and also want to work with their communities. So I think that is very encouraging that we have that here, because in most jurisdictions you would have that, everything is a bit more disintegrated.
Is there any correlation between the number of burglaries in a particular district and the number of neighborhood watches?
No, I don't think we've got that at the minute. In fact, it's probably something we need to look at. If we look at one of our jurisdictions where we have the most neighbourhood watches, they're having a spike in burglaries at the moment, and it's got to do with who is incarcerated or who's in prison and who's not imprisoned. Now, we'll deal with it, and we know who we're looking for. It's the case of getting that person. But we do have a lot of neighbourhood watches in one of our districts, but the burglaries are spiking just at this particular point. They'd been fine earlier in the year, and I'm sure they will be fine later on. One of the big measurements for us then is Cayman Islands a destination of choice for people to come? And we look at Cebu, we look at the Royal Visit, and we look at Carifta. I mean, they've all passed off extremely well. The feedback from Cebu was absolutely outstanding, and people, it seems to go and be coming back in larger numbers next year. So it feeds into the question that was asked earlier: how safe a destination is it, or how do we measure, the good and the not so good in what's going on? There's an awful lot going on in Cayman Islands. The tourist numbers are increasing rapidly by air and by sea. You'll see the ships down at the harbour front. You'll see the major events taking place here. For the next 2 weeks, Deputy Commissioner Walton will be dealing with the parade season, dealing with all that, and maybe he'll talk about that. There's a lot going on in terms of people on the streets, and there's a very good vibe around the island, and that's why I'm encouraged to say that it is a very safe place to live, to work, to visit, to retire, to invest. It's a good place, and crime is relatively low. I don't know, Kurt, do you want to talk about the parades and that?
Well, yeah, no, we have the Badabanu. I think we're all familiar with Badabanu, the carnival activities that's been ongoing now for 18 years, I believe. and that starts this weekend. We've partnered, obviously, with the organisers, and our meeting was at last meeting was at 2:30 yesterday. That went well, so that should all be starting on Friday night, going into the weekend. There will be some road closures. We will, if we haven't done already, we certainly will be publicising those road closures. We know at times this has a bit of negative feedback, but we're doing as best as we can to ensure that we mitigate against any unnecessary congestion, traffic congestion. So again, that's partnership with Badamanu this weekend, next weekend with the junior Badamanu activity, and then following that is the weekend of the long weekend with the Cayman organisers. So we've got two different organizations with two separate carnival activities. Lots, as the Commissioner mentioned, both events will be drawing a significant amount of visitors to the island from all parts of the world, as I'm made to understand. So again, it just emphasizes on that point in terms of us, the Cayman Islands being a safe place for people to visit and live, and some of these events, such as the carnival events, just demonstrates how important it is for us to maintain that persona about the safety of the Cayman Islands. But we will be working with those two organizers over the next few weeks.
We've seen in recent time where there are several drives to increase the complement of the RCIPS, where several new there was an increase in the fleet, or a new fleet of vehicles were purchased, new high-speed bikes, ATVs. Where is the RCIPS as far as in terms of equipment and personnel? Your goals to combat crime. So what I'm trying to ask is, are you fully equipped to continue reducing crime, or is there still more room to go for equipment and complement in other areas of the RCIPS?
Well, I think the good news is certainly not looking for any more resources at the moment there. I've been asked by government, I'm not looking for resources at the minute. I want to optimise the use of the resources that I have. And yes, we have been very well funded in terms of our activities, and I suppose a little bit of explanation around that. A police service is made up of a lot more than just police officers. We need lots of professional expertise to complete a number of competencies, and I mentioned the crime analysts. We now have to start looking at our information technology. We now need to look at our cyber capacity, digital forensic capacity, and cyber investigative capacity we're looking at. So we'll see a different approach in terms of traditional crimes tend to go in one direction, and these new emerging crime trends, they're probably not that new, but they're becoming more sophisticated and more complex. So we have to adapt. And you mentioned new vehicles, and we are getting more new vehicles. We're looking at the types of vehicles that we're using. The ATVs come in for a particular purpose to help us on the beach and parks and inaccessible areas. The motorcycles that came are on-road, off-road capability. We'll see public order vans arriving in the next few short weeks. New firearms vehicles will arrive in the next few short weeks. They're in build stage at the moment. But then we've lots of other things to do, and Superintendent Ebanks has just got himself a new helicopter in the area support unit, and I think he's looking for a second one. We have some work to do there in terms of working that towards the end of the year, because the goal was to have 2 helicopters so we would have coverage right around the year. And you're aware of the incident we had back in February with our helicopter. So lots of stuff going on, but not looking for resources. I have 23 officers graduating in the next 2 weeks or so from our training department, and immediately after that I have 21 officers at the moment going in to start recruit training. So the anticipation is by the end of the year 44 officers will have graduated from the training department, the majority of them being Caymanian, and glad to say we have a number of female recruits in both classes. On the last occasion we didn't have any females in the class. I think in this class we have 8, and the second class, as I understand it, we have 7. So we're pretty pleased with that we're able to attract a kind of a gender balance into the organisation. That's something we had been working towards, and also to have young Caymanian persons joining the service. So we're very pleased with that's happening, and we hope to see the benefits of that well, immediately with the class of 23 and then following another class of 21. So that's exciting. And after that, then there is some other recruitment in terms of civilian professionals and some other experienced officers in some pockets we have to deal with in terms of training and areas of expertise, and we'll deal with that as we progress through the year.
My final question, we've seen where gun crimes continue to be a nuisance, and last year, I believe it was, the RCIPS held an amnesty where people could turn in guns. Do we see any more amnesties on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to look at it. Last year we were very happy, and I let Deputy Commissioner Walton speak about that. But I think we were happy with it, with the results, what came in, 29 firearms coming in of different calibers, and he'll break that down for you. So we will look at it again, just to give it that break, and look whether we look at it this year or we look at it next year. We look at it when we think the time is right, and when we've built up more connections and the confidence there. Maybe, Kurt, you could talk a little bit more about how it went.
Well, we had certainly over 800 rounds of ammunition last year, and just around 18 firearms that were recovered during the amnesty. We thought it was a great result. We've sat with the team to look at the progressing that, whether we could do it annually or biannually. At the moment, we are perhaps looking more from a biannual perspective. We certainly think that it's important for us to continue with that. So we'll continue to look at it as the year progresses.
I just have a very quick question. Public order vans, what do we need those for?
So public order vans. So you talked about the nighttime economy. So they're when I say public order vans, we will be training people for public order deployment, and that will assist us in a number of fronts. It's more contingency planning. You could also call it operational support if you preferred, but we will have people trained up in public order. It's going to be new competency inside in RCIPS. It's a requirement of any modern police service that you would have a public order deployment ready to assist us in searches, going into areas where there are large numbers of people congregated. So it's just another tool in the armoury for us, or another tool in the toolbox for police to be able to perform the full range of functions. At the moment we don't have that capacity. We have our firearms response, and then we have our patrol vehicles, but we don't have the public order van that can carry a command team of 1 and 5, which is what would happen effectively to respond to incidents where there may be a requirement for such a response.
Real quickly, just could you sort of summarize what the thrust for the coming year is? You've talked about a lot of different things, resources. You spent the past couple years getting reconnected with the community, getting tools, getting people. What's next, strategically speaking, I suppose?
Well, it's continuous. We keep on looking at our resources, and the skill set is the big thing. What skill set do we require? Just because we have them today doesn't mean they're fit for purpose. We have to continuously look at training, and I mentioned cyber forensics. That's going to be one of the real emerging factors for us. And we do have some very exciting developments in that area. We have been looking at it over the last year, but we will have a greater cyber forensic capability and a digital footprint here on the island ourselves later in the year. So for us as a senior command team or leadership team, we're looking at our skills all the time, and it's not just Grand Cayman. So Superintendent Ebanks is looking at K9 capability over in Cayman Brack. We've got to look at having a patrol vessel over there. Commander Scotland is here from the Cayman Islands Coast Guard, which comes under the Commissioner of Police. That's a development that's going to take place later in the year. We hope to operationalise in the last quarter of 2019. So lots happening there. We're increasing our K9 capacity, both in Grand Cayman, and we do hope in Cayman Brack as well, because of their distance away from us. There's a whole lot of stuff we're looking at in terms of each week we go in, we have strategic meetings on a Monday and a Thursday morning, and then other meetings during the week as required, and we're looking at what's happening today, what's happening tomorrow, what are the factors that are impacting on us, and what do we need to do to be ready, what does success look like. So we're all the time looking to see where do we need to be to position ourselves to be better. And you're aware of the world-class civil service. When we speak to Deputy Governor, it's the one thing he talks about. It's one of the things he talks about consistently. So we can't just sit there and say we've arrived. It's going to be a continuous journey looking at what needs to be done, how we're going to do it, what resources we need. whether that's fleet or it's air or it's canine or it's manpower and specialist services, whatever it might be. We've got to continue to evolve as a police service because we do want to be modern, progressive and connected, and all those things require us to be flexible and adaptive in terms of the way we do business.
Just going back to that public order, are we talking about many different scenarios, all the way up to riot control?
We will train our people to deal with that as we should in a police service if that would happen. We have no information that is going to happen. We don't want it to happen and find out we have no competence or capability. So like a police service that's professionalising, we're looking at the range of skills we should have. And what we'll do is we have the order vans coming in. They actually won't be titled public order vans, they'll be titled operational support, so they'll have a range of, it'll be a search team, they'll double as a search team as well. So if we have large areas to search and clear, they'll be doubling up, but they will provide that nucleus of a public order response capability. So in other words, they'll be trained, they'll have a command structure, they won't be jumping out of a van, they'll be controlled, and everything will be graduated and proportionate in terms of the way that they will do their business. So there's a whole work ethic around public order, and there's a whole professional approach around it, and that's what we'll be delivering.
Just want to make Brad say something.
Yeah.
Probably.
You would like to answer.
Oh. I'm just speaking from a firearms perspective, from our start there. I think what is probably a contributing factor is that over the last 2 years we've really tightened up on our border control, and we're hoping that this has really made a big difference in the number of firearms that we see on our islands. So.
Actually, that's a very important point that Brad is making. So the police service and who we work with in terms of partnership, and the CPC, the new CPC, is a real part of that. We're working seamlessly with CPC at the moment, and it's going to be the very same with the Coast Guard. So we're going to find that we all have to work together to deliver the whole product. And I think that's an important part, that we're not seen in isolation as a police service. Yes, we are the primary law enforcement agency, but we do need to work with our colleagues, and that's working very, very well. And myself and Commander Scotland have been dealing with this for the last number of months to make sure it's a seamless transition, that we're all working together as we go forward, because there's complete interoperability in terms of what we do. So just to point out that Inspector Rashford is here from FSU. If there's anybody needs to talk to him, he's the man that sits at the helm there in terms of dealing with all those issues on a daily basis, and those 3,000 referrals, and trying to break them down into some manageable work. And Commander Scotland is there from the Coast Guard in terms of the work he's doing in terms of putting it together, and he's in the strategic planning stages at this stage, ready to come with a final product. Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope that was helpful and informative. That's what it's meant to be, as just a snapshot of where we were in 2018. We would have liked to have it done some months ago, maybe last month or the month before. Just events that occurred during the year delayed us, I'm afraid. So next year we hope to be better at it, more timely. Thank you.